Welcome to From Caving In to Crushing It, the podcast for those who find themselves immersed in adversity and choose to write their story instead of having others write it for them. I'm Drew Duraney, and I'm your host. Erin, so good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's certainly my pleasure. I love before we hit the record button to actually catch up with my guest. There's just something about the relational discussion that just enhances what happens after we hit the record button. So thank you for chatting with me for a few minutes before we hit record. It was my pleasure.
Certainly, mine as well.
So, folks, you know that I always, in the beginning, I love to thank the individual who introduced me to my wonderful guest, and I want to thank Dr. Barnsley Brown for the introduction to Erin Edgar because it's been a wonderful relationship thus far. And Dr. Barnsley, I knew you had a reason for introducing the two of us, not just what Erin does professionally, but as her as a human being, or she is a human being. So thank you so much. Why is Erin Edgar here, folks? Well, you guys know I always talk about how when we're young, we're taught that life is linear, and it's not a malicious teaching from our family or friends or society. They want that for us, and it'd be beautiful if it was. And for the most part, life is linear until it's not. But that linear approach, if you do A plus B plus C equals D, in that order, everything's going to be fine. We do believe it. And at some point in life, an external circumstance comes between one of those letters, and it changes our straight path of life into a more circuitous one. And with that, human beings will then have that adversity right in front of us, and either we notice it or we don't. And if we notice it, we either take action or we don't. And I believe there's three types of people out there, and for Erin's sake, three types of women. Woman number one has so many blind spots, so many things that are in front of her, and she doesn't see them, doesn't notice them. And she just continues to live life the way she's been told and the way she's been doing with no changes. And then there's woman number two. Woman number two does notice that adversity, yet she says, I'm the victim. Everything else is to blame. Life is doing that to me. That is a barrier, that adversity, and I can't change it. It is what it is. And she goes along life on autopilot without any changes. And on her deathbed, boy, does she have a lot of regrets. And then there's woman number three. That's Erin Edgar. It's the women and men I have on this show. And woman number three sees that adversity and she says, you know what? I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. This adversity is not a barrier, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to take massive action and work through it and become a stronger woman on the other side. So, with that introduction, Erin, if you could, please reach back as far as you need to for that defining moment or defining moments, personal or professional, whether it was the tap on the shoulder, the whisper in the ear, or like what I needed, 2x4 upside my head, that transformed you and helped you become the Erin Edgar you are now, going from the woman you are now to the woman you were. Can you share that with the audience?
Absolutely. I have two of them in mind, and thank you so much for asking me about them. It really did cause me to reflect kind of on my life and when those defining moments really occurred for me. The first moment actually was a circumstance change, a really huge life change, and personally, and the second moment was a professional change. So the first moment was when I was 9 years old. I was, uh, my parents and I had this huge move. We moved from the state of Indiana, where I was in a blind school, 5 days a week, and I would come home on the weekends. And I was sort of catapulted into a public school setting, went from a class of 7 to a class of 33 in
Whoa.
my fourth grade year, and came home every night and was challenged academically, and everything just changed for me on the
Mm.
turn of a dime.
Wow.
And what I hadn't realized fully was sort of in the blind school setting, I was in a place where I was surrounded by, oh, in case you didn't know this, I happen to be blind. I think I forgot that part. Um, I happened to be in a place where, I was with my blind peers.
Right.
We were learning similar things at the same rate. And I found myself very bored academically, and my parents knew that.
Hmm.
And we also did not want me to be apart from them for, like a week at a time.
Of
It just
course.
was not for
Yeah.
us a healthy
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
So they didn't like their jobs either, which was a help. So they picked up and moved.
There you go.
And we all picked up and moved. And I could have chosen
Mhm.
one of two paths at that point. In transformational leadership, we call it stop, look, choose.
Oh.
But I didn't know that terminology at that point,
Oh.
but I sensed in my 9-year-old brain
All
that I
right.
had two choices.
Okay.
I could either be really scared about this new environment, or I could be really happy and choose to think about it as a big adventure,
Mm.
which that was the choice. That was the path that I took. And so I remember coming home from school the first day and telling my parents what a wonderful time I'd had, thinking to myself, well, it wasn't all wonderful, like kind of scary, but that's okay. It'll be wonderful. And it turned out that it was probably the best decision that our family could have made. We had really hard struggles at first, and that's okay.
Right.
We worked through them. I had struggles in my school career, but I decided to make school and education for me about academics. And that was what it was for me because that was the way I could go forward and
Mhm.
be the best person that I could be.
Right.
I was apparently very intelligent,
Yeah.
and I channeled myself into that
Okay.
and learned to excel there. And ended up going to law school and doing all those wonderful things. Law school was a huge awakening for me. It
Yeah.
taught me that I didn't know everything, but that's another story for another time.
Right.
And so that was the first sort of personal defining moment for me. The second, shall I move on to the second?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Well,
awesome.
time. Yeah.
So, so the second defining moment happened. It actually lasted a while. It wasn't. I had to be hit over the head with a 2x4 on this one.
Yeah.
The first part of the defining moment was in 2018 when I had a family death. And I was very unhappy in my job for a variety of reasons. The
Mhm.
work environment was great, but the job itself it left a lot to be desired in a lot of ways, and I was getting burnout. So on that family death, and we realized that the person who died had this will and trust that was beautiful, but it was like 25 years outdated and nothing in it really, we don't think measured up to what the person wanted.
Um,
And it was a mess. The last 6 months of her life, our family was left in kind of turmoil. Like, how should we take care of her?
yeah.
How did she want her? Everything that she and my grandfather had worked so hard for, how did she want that taken care of? We really didn't know. And there was a lot of hard feelings in the family after her death, which could have been avoided.
Right.
And that's not said in judgment. It's said as, wow, this was an easy thing to
Right.
avoid, but people don't think about it. And
No.
so I made this commitment to myself that
Yeah.
when I was ready,
When you're ready.
I would not let my community, people in my community go through that.
Yeah.
It was just not, it didn't need to be.
Right.
And so, yeah, when I'm ready, well, it turned out that there was a 2x4 that needed to hit me. COVID happened.
Oh boy. There you go.
And so the pandemic was a huge value assessment for me,
Mhm.
as it was, I think, for a lot of people.
Sure.
And I asked myself, when am I going to be ready? When is it going to happen?
Yeah.
It's got to happen now.
Hmm.
And that was the second part of that defining moment. The 2x4 hit me on the shoulder and said, you need to, if you're not happy working for someone else because you want to do stuff things your own way,
Right.
you need to step out and start working for yourself and actually make this happen,
Mhm.
and make it happen now, because this is a time where everyone is in this liminal space.
Hmm.
We're all, liminal space is my fancy word for this huge gap where we don't know exactly what's going to happen next.
Ah,
This is the time for me to step out. I was telling myself this and actually make this happen. And I did. And I can't tell you it's been 100% easy. And and now I am an entrepreneur. I am doing estate planning for people and helping people in my community every day so that what happened to my family will not happen to others. And caring about people in my own way and serving my clients to the best of my ability to do that, thanks to that second defining moment,
wow.
that 2x4.
You know, there's minimal two things I think of right away. And one is you did it scared in both your personal defining moment and professional.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is you empowered yourself by self-advocating because you could have taken one route personally when you moved and you took the road less traveled, which was very empowering. And then even with the work, you liked the work, but you liked the place, but not what you were doing, and you wanted to like kind of write your own story, create your own path, and you made another empowering decision. So self-advocacy seems to be one of your skills, strong points, thank goodness. And now you are advocating for others who are in similar situations. When do you recall what really instilled in you this self-advocacy to really stand up for yourself? Was that mom and dad? Was it tell me who, what gave you that strength of self-advocacy?
Well, I will say I'm not perfect. There are a lot of times when I don't advocate, but I know when it's happening
Hmm.
because something changes, in my life and in my
Right.
perception of myself,
Hmm.
and I'm no longer that happy person. I get in that scared place.
Right.
And now I can like notice it and shift into a state of self-advocacy, partially because it's one of the strengths that, it's something that is a strength. And there are a lot of times when, I don't even see that. I
Mm.
don't notice it. And it takes
Right.
other people, like yourself to kind of wallop me over the head and say, hey, remember that? Um, and to answer your question, I think I believe that it was really my parents
Mhm.
who stood up for me when I couldn't. I didn't have the tools.
Yeah.
And we say that, that move, that's why it was so defining.
Right.
It was like, wow, we can make a change and all kinds of wonderful stuff can
Right.
happen. They stood up for me when I couldn't
Yeah.
and were a huge force in teaching me
Hmm.
to do the same,
Yeah.
stand up for myself, stand up for other people.
Right.
I am really not a person who goes in for rallies and mass protest, but I will
Hmm.
stand up for one person at a time
I love it.
because that's where I believe the change happens, or
Right.
at least
Right.
a lot of the meaningful change.
Sure.
And so I, I learned that from them.
Hmm.
Stand up for yourself, stand up for the people you care about,
Right.
and advocate for your own greatness. I don't think they said it in those words, but
Yeah.
advocate for yourself because you can do whatever you set your mind to.
Yes.
That was something they always taught me.
I love that.
And there are people in this world who can't.
It's true because they're taught the opposite
They're
and
taught the opposite, or they don't have the tools in front of them,
right.
or they aren't physically able
Yeah.
or mentally able
Right.
to do. But they can act within their means and
Hmm.
still enjoy life. And I think
Yeah.
that's very important.
I want to ask you about the distinction between when you're in Indiana in a what was a classroom of how many? Seven?
7. I think the
Seven.
biggest one I was in was 11.
All right. So let's think of that as your safe space
Mm-hmm.
because the quantity of people there and they were all similar to you in terms of not being blind.
Mm-hmm.
And then going out of your comfort zone to classroom of 30 something of where probably like 99% of them had their sight. Were you treated differently? Did you notice it or did you not care? Because I know that impacts a lot of people regardless of what differences they have, where people are treated differently or judged, which is not a good thing. What do you think?
That's really an interesting question. At that point in my life, when I was, going into that public school setting,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that in that year, it started to become different as years went by because kids started learning from their adults
Right.
in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
But in that year, when I went into that public school setting, the
Yeah.
children did not treat me differently at all.
Love it.
It was really refreshing. It was
Yeah.
like, you
Absolutely.
know, let's get to know each other and let's
Yeah.
hang out and do
Mm-hmm.
things. And it was great. The adults did. I
Yeah.
was held back academically
Yeah.
in some ways that we quickly found out about, and my parents advocated for me again.
Good.
But the adults did. As the years went by, the kids started to treat me differently.
Yeah.
And as the years also went by, I decided I was different. So I was, I played the game too and held myself apart from a lot of the kids and sort of, perpetuated it too.
Right.
And so, I had some part in that. And
Mm.
I'm not saying that to be judgmental,
Right.
actually.
No.
It's just a noticing.
Yeah.
And so as I, grew,
Mm.
my differences came out and it allowed me that sort of holding myself apart allowed me in a certain sense to develop my own inner self
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
bring a lot of focus to my own inner kind of like reflective self
Yeah.
and envision what I wanted for my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some ways it was good. In other ways it kind of held me back socially a little bit. And
Yeah.
so
I can
even now
understand.
when you ask me,
Mm-hmm.
well, what are your friendships like? I'm kind of like, I'm kind of an infant. I isolate myself a lot, but I do know how to really listen to people
Mm-hmm.
and get deep into what people might not be saying.
Right.
And so, take what you want from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It has been a strength in some ways,
Yeah.
and in some ways, it is a vulnerability.
I thank you, Erin, for being vulnerable, but you have so many strengths and some people, um, this whole judgment thing, it's very interesting because, well, think about it though, when we're born, we're like not a clean slate because you believe in spirituality, there's something there, but we're taught to be judgmental. We're
Hmm.
taught to be, I'll say the word, racism isn't, we're not born with it. A lot of good things and not good things are taught to us. And at a young age, we don't know the difference between what's quote unquote right and wrong, right? We're
We're
told
taught all of that.
we're told what's right and wrong. So to the parents out there of young people, think I just encourage you to please think twice about judgment and assessment. I always tell people that I talk about window versus mirror accountability. It's much easier to look out the window and judge who you see out the window than it is to look in the mirror and judge who you see in the mirror. None of us are perfect. I always encourage people work on yourselves, and until you're perfect, don't judge others. Let's let kids be kids. And one of the big things when we're told we're adults at 18, we're told what you can and cannot do, and we still have our inner child inside of us. We just happen to say no to it too
Hmm.
often. So you're still young inside. You're still that young child who did not have biases, um, and you can reach back and kind of reflect now and live in the moment and be aware of the detrimental effects it is to treat people differently because they are different from you. So that's my. I'll stop, get off my soapbox, and stop my lecture. But just Erin, you give some great points there. So moving into the professional environment, from the organization you were at where you liked the place you were at, but the work wasn't what you were looking for, that transition to entrepreneurship and your own business. Tell us about that transition, how smooth or rocky it was.
So I woke up one day
Hmm.
working for the place I was working at before and had, a client list and cleaned it up and closed all my cases and did all the things I needed to do to leave. And I woke up the next day with no clients. I had a little bit of capital, personal capital that I had invested, really not, no income coming in,
Hmm.
no security there.
Hmm.
I will say I'm blessed to have a husband who has been supporting us while I've been getting myself together,
Yeah, that's
and
wonderful.
breaking even most years.
Mm.
But it it was kind of a weird feeling.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I realized I had a lot of limiting mindsets that I
Mm.
had ignored, limiting beliefs, limitations that I was placing on myself
Okay.
that I had just ignored, not thought about. And it had gotten me this far, ignoring them. It had gotten me to
Yeah.
the ripe old age of 44,
There you go.
and
Yeah.
gotten me in a good career and well educated. But
Right.
now I had to come face to face with them
Mm.
because I was in this business alone. And so
Mm.
there were these things like, you're not good enough. You can't make this. You can't do this.
Mm.
Um, you're really afraid. You have no skills in this field of, it was a different legal field.
Right.
And I had a lot of education, but I didn't have a lot of experience in implementation, which is a whole
Mhm.
different ballgame
Of
in
course.
law
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in most professions. You don't really know anybody. You can never, build a network. How would you even do that? All of these limiting mindsets really were getting in my way, and I had no experience to really build a base on, or
Mhm.
no referral network. So, wow, what was I going to do?
Yeah.
And for a while, for a few months, I had no direction for the first couple months.
Yeah.
And then I joined Business Networking International. And
Okay.
I've been a member ever since
Hmm.
because that is something that has given me, some referrals. It's given me other professionals I can connect with.
That's
And
great.
if I know people who need them, then I send them to them. If they know people who need my services, they send them to me, and we all trust each other.
Mhm.
And that, to me, that know, like, and trust factor, which is
Yeah.
so important in business,
Yeah.
is reflected in that organization. And so I've been a member ever since.
That's wonderful.
I realized I'd have to speak about what I did. And
Okay.
while I wasn't really terrified to get up in front of an audience and sing, because I've
Mm-hmm.
done that all my life,
Ah,
speaking was a whole different ball game.
interesting.
Yeah. So lawyers, we do have lives and have other interests, by the way.
Yes,
Not a lot of
I
people know
just
that or
thought you
believe
did.
it, but we do.
Uh,
And so speaking was a different ball game. So I
mhm.
had joined Toastmasters International,
Yeah.
and I really threw myself into kind of selling from stage, if you
Good for
get
you.
my drift,
Yes, I
like
do. Certainly do.
promoting my services
Yeah.
in speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I realized was that I would need business coaching because
Mm.
I don't know a thing about running a business,
Yeah.
running a
Yeah.
law firm.
Yeah.
Goodness. So I had several different coaches over the years. It's how I met Dr. Barnsley.
Okay.
I had a couple of coaches coach me in the specifics of running a law firm
Right.
and some of the KPIs, the performance indicators we need
Yeah.
to look for in law
Right.
firms, which are
Right.
specific and unique.
Okay.
And so all of those things together have helped me build relationships, which is really key if you're an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
help with the mindset
Yeah.
factor
Mm-hmm.
with the coaching, and also learn how to access, I call it my inner promoter,
Ah,
how to promote myself and not have as much of that imposter syndrome.
love that.
I'm
Yeah.
I don't know anything. I'm not enough.
Yeah.
I'm a fraud, whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. Oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
screwed up today. I'm terrible. Not have as much of it
Yeah.
as I was having before. And notice I say as much because it's not going away, folks. It'll always
Um,
be there.
uh,
Every one of us has it.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, our subconscious there thinks it's protecting us
Hmm.
from those negative self-talk, but we do have the power and control to tell our subconscious, cut it out. I am enough. Let's talk in a different way, and words matter. Um, I'd love to reach back and thank your husband for his support for you,
Oh,
and I'm sure you're as supportive to him as he is for you.
hmm.
I always love to learn how people meet the love of their life. And would you mind sharing the story of how and your husband met?
So, Rodney and I met in a parking lot.
Okay.
Neither,
Wow.
and both of us are visually impaired, and neither one of us drive. So everyone's like, "Parking lot? That
Yeah.
sounds weird to me."
Right. Okay.
And it's not as crazy as it sounds. We lived in like in college dormitories. This is back when you had a boys' dorm and a girls' dorm,
Okay.
back in the 90s. And
Yeah.
they were very close together, and we were out in front in the parking lot.
Uh-huh.
And one of our mutual friends said, "Oh, I want to introduce you to my friends, Rodney and
Oh,
Dwight."
love
And then
it.
it turned out that 45 minutes later, he and I were still in a conversation and virtually ignored the other two people.
I love that.
And that being said, we remained close with the other male friend that she introduced us to.
Yeah.
He was the best man at our wedding. And,
Oh, I love it.
we were together for 10 years before we got married.
I love
And we're still together 20 years later. So there must be something going on there.
I love it. I love that story. Congratulations.
Thank
Way to
you.
go, Rodney.
And there you go.
I love it. I love it. So getting back to what you do professionally now, give me an example of a client success story that
Mm,
just don't have to name anybody's names, but just give us
hmm.
a 50,000 foot level of the type of need an individual had where you were able to come through and provide them with life-changing services.
Absolutely. So I had a client come to me. She was uh, a single mother, although
Mhm.
I think she's since married, but she was a single mother. She had an 18-year-old autistic daughter,
Okay.
and she wanted her daughter to be provided for upon, mother upon her death.
Yeah.
And at the time, she was not contemplating marriage, and she was kind of alone in life. And
Mm.
so one of the other things that came up for her was, I want to be supported too.
Yeah.
If something should happen to me,
Of course.
I want to make sure that I'm supported so my daughter can be
Mm.
supported.
Yep.
And so her daughter was fairly high functioning,
Mm.
autistic.
Okay.
She was also 18. And
Uh,
so we made arrangements so that the mother could have estate planning documents that provided for her, and made arrangements to provide for her daughter, and someone could kind of help her daughter navigate through financial minefields,
mm.
because her daughter was not, money was just not something that she was good at.
Right.
And she had some routines that she was accustomed to. So we made other documents that kind of outlined the routines that she had in her life,
Mm.
so that people would know how she was accustomed to being cared for. Although she didn't need a guardian or anything, she was self sufficient, could live on her own, but there were also routines that she needed to follow,
Right.
and people that needed to kind of look out for her. So we arranged that. And also, one of the other things we arranged is for the daughter
Mhm.
to make arrangements for her own health care, her own financial support in case something happened to her. Because while she was competent, she was also alone too. She didn't have a husband or, like a team of people around her
Right.
that hospitals could legally,
Right.
well, not legally is the wrong word, but who would automatically go to
Right.
for information on her and how things should happen for her. And so that was really a success story for me, and for the mother and for the daughter. And they
Yeah.
both expressed to me how they felt cared for and supported by people
Mhm.
that they knew and trusted,
Yeah.
who would help them out.
That thank you for sharing that story because I mean it's aligned with where I'm at right now because my son is 23. He's got autism and again highly functioning cognitive like your client. And what's interesting is I've seen that many of the high functioning, I hate that term high functioning,
Mm,
assuming the others are low functioning, but ones who cognitively um, are strong and more social skills and emotion management is where the weakness is. Um, they're misunderstood
Hmm.
growing up because on the outside you cannot tell, for the most part, that they have autism because they are articulate and smart and speak, and it's only when there's a misstep in their routine that kind of puts a, you know, a kink in their social skills or managing emotions that people then wonder what's going on. And the first thought is behavioral issues as opposed to the fact that they have autism. So, what, what, I guess, what message would you give to a caregiver, a parent of a high, quote unquote, high functioning child with autism? What kind of motivational advice would you give them in their own caregiving, like the self care? Because
Hmm.
it is challenging to see your child struggle and be articulate and being able to say that my son says he's a burden to me, and
Mm.
I hate hearing that word. You're never a burden. So I don't know. What words of encouragement do you give to a parent of a high functioning autistic child?
And I would say just at the outset that many children, especially disabled children,
Hmm.
and you know, the word disabled has its drawbacks. I
Yes.
definitely approve of it over the word handicapped, which
Yes, me
to me
too.
always felt weird. We'll go
Yeah.
with disabled because
Uh-huh.
that's actually the one I'm comfortable with
Yes.
using. Um, we always feel like a burden.
Mm.
Well, I mean, maybe not all of us, but
Mhm.
many of us.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we have to be reminded about. We're
Yeah.
not burdens. And so, did it do it again?
Yeah, we lost your visual.
Hang on.
Sorry, we'll wait. It's worth waiting for. There we go.
There we go. Some of us do feel like burdens,
Yeah.
and it's worth reminding ourselves that we're not. And it's always helpful when other people remind us that we're not and
Mhm.
don't get frustrated or upset with us, like, well, of course you're not a burden.
Yeah.
Why would you think that?
Right.
And our society has taught us to feel like we're lacking.
Mm. Yes. Yes.
So we feel like something's missing,
Right.
even if it's not.
Mm.
And it's always interesting to remind myself
Yeah.
as a disabled person that I might have a sense that's lacking. And I have other things that got developed as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I would suggest that parents do, this actually relates,
Yeah.
one of the things that developed in me is that sense of presence
Mm-hmm.
that I alluded to earlier. I didn't say presence, but I said I know how to hear things that people
Mm.
don't say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you ask me, well, how do you do that? And I don't know.
I don't
Just some
know.
intuition,
Yeah.
something.
Yep. Yep.
And this is something that can be developed, I believe,
I
in
do too.
anybody.
Yes.
And so, one of the things that I would suggest to parents and caregivers of high functioning or otherwise disabled adults is that sense of presence.
Mm.
There are things that they need.
Right.
And even when highly articulate, perhaps can't communicate what they need
Mm-hmm.
or why they're having some kind of meltdown today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And life just isn't working out.
Yes.
And so parents are and caregivers often get frustrated because, like, what did I do wrong? Like, I'm doing all I know to do,
Right.
and they're having a meltdown. Why weren't they having it yesterday?
Mm.
And so that sense of presence,
Mm.
that just being with your child,
Yes.
even in their frustration.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I realize that, like, you get frustrated and feel helpless because there's nothing that you can do,
Yes.
right? You feel there's,
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
and even being with them in that
Mm-hmm.
frustrated space
Mm-hmm.
and opening up to their frustration may give you cues that you are not aware of as
Yeah.
to what is going on with them, why they're frustrated, or whatever the case may be, why
Yeah.
they're not quite with it, why they're having a meltdown. Everyone reacts differently, so I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to assume everyone reacts the same if their
Right.
routines aren't followed.
Right.
And perhaps just being with them
Mm-hmm.
in that space, like, oh, honey, I know you're frustrated. I know it's not working today. I really feel that from you.
Yeah.
Maybe we can work together and figure out why.
I love the way you approach that because it's more of a neutral statement that's reassuring.
Hmm.
Because I can speak for my son. He's looking for understanding, security, somebody to be there for him. And you're right, just being in the same room, that presence is so impactful. So thank you for sharing that. And
May I say one more
yeah,
thing?
please,
Because
please,
this is really important.
absolutely.
Caregivers will not always be there for their children.
Hmm.
It's a fact, it's an inevitability.
Yeah,
Something may happen,
yeah,
and you may not always be there. And that's why it's so important. I believe the caveat to that is it's important to introduce others to your children who will agree
hmm,
to care for them. And it's helpful to do that kind of early when you're still
hmm,
there so that
absolutely.
they can develop a relationship with those other people and be comfortable enough to open up to them
Hmm.
and tell them why they need what they need, or even to be open and that person to be open in that same present tense
Yes,
with those same present senses
right.
to allow for that deepening relationship
Hmm.
so that when the caregiver isn't there,
Yeah.
that other person can slip into that role, can know, and the child can be comfortable enough with them
Hmm.
to allow them into their lives.
Absolutely. That is very important. Building a strong, trusting community around for your special needs child is extremely important. Um, it's interesting you mentioned the word disabled. I've been using lately the word differently abled
Mm.
because
Mm-hmm.
there's so many strengths that people with disabilities or people with special needs have, and our job as the atypical versus typical. The typical is to encourage the strengths that they have to bring it out, man, because they're
Mm-hmm.
unique. And I've learned so much from my son. I mean, he fills a lot of my weaknesses up, and we are a
Absolutely.
formidable team together. So, um, the audience certainly has captured the essence of Erin Edgar, and they're going to want to get in touch with you, Erin. So, folks, Erin said on LinkedIn and Facebook, it would be at Erin Edgar Legal would be like
Mm-hmm.
the whatever the handle for
That's the
Facebook
handle for
for
Facebook, and the
Facebook.
LinkedIn is Erin period Edgar because
There
that's the way
you
it's
go.
set up.
All right, that'd be great. And
Mm-hmm.
you can email Erin. Best way to get in touch with Erin at edgarlegal.com. Did I get that right?
Erin at erinedgarlegal.com. And I'm
All
sure these
right.
will be in the show
Yeah,
notes.
I'll put all this in the show
Hmm.
notes. Anything we have not discussed that you feel is important to share with the audience, Erin, that we missed?
One of the things that I really believe strongly in, and this is coming from a personal as well as a professional space,
Hmm.
is to it's revisiting what I just said,
Hmm.
which is we will not always be there for our children. In my case, I don't have children, but my clients do.
Hmm.
And I want to give back to children as much as possible because they're our future. And we won't always be there for them to do that.
Hmm.
And so, one of the things that I really believe strongly in is to build a supportive team for you and your children so that you can be there to protect them as long as possible. And even when they become adults, they're your children.
Hmm.
And so, those boundaries may change, but protecting them, leaving them a legacy, supporting yourself as much as possible, and allowing them to support you in your older years as much
Hmm.
as possible because I believe children are just, we feel so much honor in supporting the people who gave us life. It is
Hmm.
beyond. And I know some attorneys will tell you, leave your children out of it. They don't need to be part of it. I believe that. I believe just the opposite.
Yes.
Allowing them to support you, allowing them to know what
Hmm.
is going on in your head
Yes,
is very important,
it is.
and making sure that they're cared for if they have different needs that may be required
Hmm.
if you're not there. All of those things are very important. So building that supportive, protective team around yourself is very integral to what I advice that I give my clients and even advice that I give my friends,
Sure.
because we should not go through this life alone. And if there's one thing in the modern age that I'm kind of really kind of freaked out by, it's that we're connected on the internet, but our
Mm.
personal and our personal connections have really gone down, and the
Yeah.
rate of mental illness has really shot up as a
Yeah.
result.
Hmm.
So stay connected to the people you love
Yes.
so that you can protect them and they can support you.
Love it. Love it. Uh, Two final questions. You ready for this? All right.
All
So,
right.
Erin, you're sitting in your happy place and you're sitting down with young 7 to 10-year-old Erin Edgar, and you want to give her advice about life. What are you going to tell her, Erin?
I would tell her that she can accomplish everything that she wants to accomplish in life. And the keys to doing that are uh, commitment and resilience
Mm-hmm.
and love,
Mm-hmm.
because we all encounter people who do not understand us, or situations where we need to kind of pivot and do things differently and maybe add things,
Mm-hmm.
because the world is not made for blind people. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could choose as 7 to 10-year-old Erin to treat it like a victim and the world's out to get me. And
Right.
I'm just going to be, kind of like stomped on, I guess, and work for Industries for the Blind because that's, the only place that will have me. And I would encourage her to persist, be resilient, be committed, and love everyone regardless, because you know what? People show compassion. The world doesn't, I'd hate to say it this way, but it's the easiest way to say it. The world doesn't know better yet.
Yes.
Society kind of hasn't caught up to the fact that, I'll use your term, differently abled people have our own strengths too. And the more we show the world that with love rather than with a bludgeon,
Mm-hmm.
like, look at me, look at how
Yeah.
amazing I am.
Yep.
The more that instead we say, you know what? Did you know that? So the more we encourage people to be loving towards us, be
Mm-hmm.
curious,
Yep.
the more effective
Yep.
we will be.
I love that.
And the more we'll get people on, advocating for us too, because then we'll show others who we love.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
be loving, persistent, and resilient is what
Love
I
it.
would tell her.
Love that. All right, switch hats. Now you're sitting down with young businesswoman, young entrepreneur Erin Edgar, and you want to give her advice about business. What are you going to tell her?
I would tell her the same thing because, being on being on your own in a business is not it's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's
So,
not.
and I mean, I talk about quitting every so often. I'll tell my husband I'm
Yeah.
quitting. He's like,
Yep. Yep.
no, you're not.
No, you're not. Yep.
I mean, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
So I would give her the exact same advice. Be persistent, be resilient, learn how to pivot when life just isn't going your way,
Mm.
and be loving,
Yeah.
because, you know, it's kind of hard out there. It can be kind of stressful out there.
Hmm.
And the more loving that we can be towards our clients and our friends and our fellow business owners, and I say loving in the broadest sense. I don't mean like going up and kissing people.
Yeah.
It's it's more like caring about people, being
Kindness.
open to people
Right.
and their motivations, their reasons for doing things,
Hmm.
and being curious about people. Caring and open is what I mean by loving in that
Love
sense.
that. Love it.
But the more we can do that and be resilient and committed and persistent, the more strides we'll make and the more we'll learn and the more experiences we'll gain.
I love that. Well, Erin, I want to thank you for not just coming onto the show, but coming into my life. You're a wonderful human being. Keep doing what you're doing. You're helping so many people, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Drew. I've been delighted to be here.
Everybody out there, please take care of yourselves. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and give us a review to help others find it. I'd like you to answer this question. Are you living the life you want to live, or are you living the life others want you to live? I'd like you to think about that for a second. because I strongly suggest you live the life you want to live. If you want to learn more about what I stand for and my services and how I'm able to help many men get out of their own way, please go to my website at www.profitcompassion.com. Feel free to also email me at drew@profitcompassion.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Take care of yourself and choose to write your own story instead of letting others write it for you.